let's unpack this. Imagine a region where centuries of history, global rivalries, and internal struggles all kind of converge,
Yeah.
creating this, well, truly dizzying geopolitical landscape. That's the Horn of Africa. It's a place of just immense strategic importance, yet, it rarely captures consistent media attention.
That's right.
So our mission today is really a deep dive. We're going into the rich source material, articles, research, expert notes to try and understand this complex interplay of foreign interests and local forces that have shaped this dynamic subregion for centuries, right up to what we're seeing unfold in 2025.
Yeah.
The goal here is to cut through some of the noise and give you, our listener, the key insights you need, really, to be well-informed about this critical part of the world.
And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how the Horn, despite often being, out of the daily headlines, it actually functions as a microcosm of global power dynamics. It's not simply a collection of individual states. It's a vital choke point for world trade. It's a battleground for influence, and really a mirror reflecting these broader geopolitical shifts.
Right. And to really grasp that significance, let's maybe make sure we're all on the same page about the geography itself. When we talk about the Horn, the narrow definition usually refers to Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia.
Correct.
But then there's the Greater Horn, which kind of expands that circle to include Kenya, Uganda, South Sudan, Sudan, and even Egypt is sometimes included. What makes this area so incredibly strategic, as our sources really emphasize, is its location, particularly the Bab el-Mandeb Strait.
Absolutely key.
That narrow stretch connects the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, and it's basically a maritime highway. A huge proportion of world trade passes right through there.
And if we connect that geography to the bigger historical picture, it becomes really clear why this strategic location has attracted external powers for centuries. I mean, we're talking about a timeline stretching from ancient Egyptian invasions way back to medieval conflicts involving Ottomans and Portuguese.
Wow.
Right through the European imperialist scramble in the late 19th century. This history, as our sources frequently highlight, it really raises an important question. How do these historical impositions, like, those arbitrary colonial borders, continue to profoundly impact today's conflicts?
That's such a crucial point about those borders. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How these decisions made so long ago continue to cast such a long shadow. What's maybe one of the most striking examples our sources point to about this lasting impact?
I think the division of the Somali people is probably the most tragic and, clear-cut example. They were, and they still are, essentially split among what is today Somalia, Djibouti, Ethiopia, and Kenya. Our sources describe this as a deep wound that has continued to fester. And what that truly means, for a wound like that to fester for generations, is this pervasive sense of injustice, a constant pull towards irredentism, this desire to reclaim lost territory or unite scattered ethnic kin.
So it's not just history, it's active.
Exactly. It isn't just a historical footnote. It directly fuels current nationalist movements, cross-border insurgencies, and it makes true regional integration incredibly difficult because these fundamental identity issues are just never fully resolved. We also saw, the French establish what became Djibouti, the Italians carved out Eritrea, the British took British Somaliland. Ethiopia, though, stands out.
Oh, yes.
A significant local power that famously resisted Italian invasion at the Battle of Adwa, which, sent shockwaves through Europe at the time.
So that colonial era ends, but the external involvement doesn't.
No, not at all. The post-colonial era then ushered in a new, equally intense wave of external involvement. During the Cold War, the U.S. and the Soviet Union, they immediately recognized the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden as critical maritime routes, so they aggressively sought local allies.
Right.
Ethiopia was initially considered the centerpiece, which then led to this flurry of changing allegiances after the 1974 Ethiopian Revolution. And beyond the superpowers, you had regional players like Egypt and Saudi Arabia also engaging strategically, often trying to limit Israeli influence or, promote pan-Arabist and pan-Islamic agendas.
So we've covered the colonial hangover and the Cold War chess match. But then, as the world changed in the mid-1990s, this fascinating new chapter began. You might expect things to quiet down, but instead, new global players like Iran and China saw a massive opportunity. It's here that the geopolitical chessboard truly became crowded, and you could argue the stakes got even higher. Our sources mention that these new players took advantage of something called Afro-pessimism in the West. Can you just quickly unpack what that term Afro-pessimism signifies here?
Sure. Afro-pessimism essentially refers to a period where many Western nations had become, well, quite disillusioned with Africa's economic and political prospects. They were often withdrawing investment or focusing primarily on aid rather than, say, trade or strategic partnerships.
Yeah.
This created a pretty significant strategic vacuum, which countries like China, with their, no strings attached development and infrastructure models, were perfectly positioned to fill.
And fill it they did.
Indeed. The modern scramble for influence is quite intense. China, for instance, has become the leading external actor. It's driven primarily by economic interests, a thirst for resources, new markets for its goods, and opportunities for these massive infrastructure loans.
Right, the Belt and Road.
Exactly. And this has led to what some analysts call debt trap diplomacy. What that means, essentially, is a situation where a country takes on so much debt to a foreign power, in this case China, that it gives the lenders significant political leverage, potentially allowing them to dictate policy or gain strategic assets.
Like ports or bases.
Precisely. Djibouti, for instance, owes over 70% of its external debt to Chinese creditors. That gives Beijing immense influence. Ethiopia, too, carries nearly $14 billion in Chinese debt. China even established its first overseas naval support base in Djibouti back in 2017 and has supplied arms to Ethiopia.
And Russia's back, too.
Oh, yes. Russia is actively reestablishing its presence, notably striking that deal with Sudan for a naval support base in Port Sudan, a deal quickly endorsed by Sudan's current military government. Ethiopia signed a defense pact with Russia, and Eritrea has offered its Red Sea ports for use by the Russian Navy.
Interesting. How are Horn governments reacting to that?
Well, many governments in the Horn seem to view Russia as a strategic partner. They've tacitly accepted the Ukraine invasion despite quite a bit of Western pressure.
And the U.S.
The U.S. approach, meanwhile, is predominantly centered on security and counterterrorism. You have the Combined Joint Task Force Horn of Africa, headquartered in Djibouti. However, its relations with Ethiopia have definitely soured significantly over the Tigray conflict.
So Djibouti is really ground zero for this competition.
It truly is the epitome, as some sources call it, hosting military bases for the U.S., France, China, several Western European states, Japan, and Saudi Arabia. It's a striking illustration of this global competition playing out in one tiny country.
And it's not just the global superpowers, is it? We're seeing Middle Eastern and regional powers getting much more involved, too.
Definitely. Powers like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Turkey, Iran, and Egypt have dramatically intensified their involvement since the early 2000s. This seems driven by a combination of, well, rising oil prices initially, urgent food security concerns, and of course, ensuring Red Sea security.
Right. Tell me about Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
Okay, so they've pursued this breadbasket strategy, large-scale land acquisitions in places like Ethiopia and Sudan to boost their food supply. They've also gained strategic footholds through logistics firms like DP World in Djibouti and Somaliland.
DP World, right.
And they've established military bases, like in Assab, Eritrea, and actively influenced alliances, often trying to counter Iran, while supporting various factions in Sudan and Somalia. The UAE also gave significant logistical assistance and arms to Ethiopia during the Tigray conflict.
What about Iran and Qatar?
Well, Iran maintains strong ties with Sudan and Eritrea and has used Eritrea as a platform to influence politics over in Yemen. Qatar has often tried to play a mediator role in conflicts, but it's also been accused by some of supporting certain Islamic movements and was seen as instrumental in Farmage's presidency in Somalia.
And Turkey seems quite active, especially in Somalia.
Very active. Turkey has expanded its soft power and investment significantly in Somalia. They established a military base in Mogadishu and operate its port. They've also engaged in economic cooperation with Ethiopia and provided weapons during the Tigray conflict.
Okay, that leaves Egypt. Their big concern is the Nile, right?
Absolutely. Egypt's deepest and, you could say, most existential concern is the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the GER, on the Blue Nile. Cairo has, as our sources put it, skillfully leveraged diplomatic and military ties with Sudan, Eritrea, and Somalia to try and counterbalance Ethiopian initiatives. This has essentially formed what's been described as an encirclement policy against Ethiopia.
Wow, encirclement. That's strong language.
It is. Egypt even secured a military base in Somalia. It's really a classic geopolitical chess move, trying to pressure Ethiopia from multiple sides.
So given everything we've just discussed, all this history, all these external players, What has been the real impact of all this outside involvement on the Horn itself?
That's the critical question, and our sources are pretty blunt about it. The involvement has often been adventurous and self-serving, with, frankly, little regard for the long-term repercussions on the ground.
Indeed.
Meaning, these external rivalries have demonstrably destabilized the subregion, they've fueled proxy wars, they've led to rapid militarization, and often actively undermined nascent democratization efforts and fragile peace processes. It's complicated things enormously.
It's a dizzying picture, isn't it? It almost sounds like the Horn of Africa is like this giant, multi-layered chessboard with players from all over the world making their moves, sometimes without even consulting each other.
That's a good analogy.
Let's try and get into the specifics of what's happening on the ground, say, in 2025, because these aren't isolated events, are they? They seem deeply interlinked, constantly influencing each other.
Absolutely. And what's often missed, I think, is that while the grand chessboard analogy holds, the pieces themselves, the local actors, they aren't just passively waiting for instructions, they're making their own strategic moves, too.
Okay, good point. Let's start with Ethiopia. The peace after the Tigray War sounds incredibly fragile.
It is. There's renewed violence flaring up in the Amhara and Oromia regions. And amidst these internal challenges, a primary ambition for Ethiopia is to regain sovereign coastal access to the Red Sea. Access it lost when Eritrea seceded back in 1993.
And that led to that controversial deal with Somaliland.
Exactly. That pursuit led to the highly controversial 2024 Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU, with self-declared Somaliland for port access. Our sources describe this as sparking a regional tinderbox.
Why a tinderbox? What does that mean in practical terms? Why did that specific deal ignite such a firestorm?
Well, it's a tinderbox because Ethiopia's move immediately touched on these deep-seated national sovereignty issues. For Somalia, which views Somaliland as its integral territory, this was a direct challenge.
Okay.
And for Eritrea, which is extremely sensitive about its own ports and sovereignty, it looked like a potential threat. By making this deal directly with Somaliland, Ethiopia effectively sidestepped and, you could say, challenged Somalia's sovereignty. This deeply angered both Somalia and Eritrea. They see it as a direct threat to their territorial integrity and the regional balance of power. It immediately raised the specter of armed conflict.
Right. Then there's the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the GRD. Still a major source of tension, particularly with Egypt.
Huge tension. Ethiopia views it as a source of national pride and absolutely crucial for its development, its electricity generation. They aimed to double current production. But Egypt considers it an existential water threat. I mean, given its 90% reliance on the Nile.
And the mediation isn't going anywhere.
It's stalled. Mediation remains at a stalemate. Egypt prefers internationalizing the issue, bringing in more global players. Ethiopia firmly favors keeping it within the African Union mediation framework. This situation holds significant potential for a proxy war, unfortunately. And Sudan is also heavily involved, very concerned about its own water regulation and downstream impacts.
And Sudan itself is in crisis.
Yes, Sudan, of course, is engulfed in a devastating civil war between the National Army and the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF. It's leading to severe state collapse.
And becoming a proxy battleground.
Absolutely. This internal conflict has unfortunately turned Sudan into what our sources call a theater for wider proxy competition. What that signifies is that external powers are actively backing different sides, effectively turning Sudan's civil war into an extension of their own regional rivalries.
Who's backing whom?
Well, the UAE and Ethiopia, for instance, have shown strong favor for the RSF, while Egypt and Eritrea are supporting army-aligned militias. It just adds fuel to the fire.
Meanwhile, Somalia is trying to rebuild amidst all this.
Yes, Somalia is making fragile progress with state rebuilding, but amidst persistent Islamist extremism like al-Shabaab and these deep-seated clan rivalries.
And external meddling there, too.
Oh, yes. Our sources make it clear that it has become a battleground for external rivalries, with Persian Gulf powers and Turkey competing fiercely for influence, often backing different internal factions. Turkey, for instance, has that significant military base in Mogadishu and operates the city's port, giving it considerable sway.
And the Somaliland deal affected Somalia how?
Ethiopia's Somaliland deal has further galvanized Somali nationalism. It actually seems to have strengthened Mogadishu's alliances with Egypt and Eritrea, creating this counterblock.
Okay, and finally, the Ethiopian-Eritrean rivalry itself. How are things looking there in 2025?
Not good. Our sources report that relations between them have dramatically deteriorated in 2025. Both nations appear to be on a war footing. specifically over access to Eritrean ports, especially Assab. Eritrea maintains what's described as a hardline approach to sovereignty.
What does that mean? Hardline approach.
It means Eritrea is extremely unwilling to compromise on any perceived challenge to its national control or territorial integrity, especially regarding its vital Red Sea access points. They guard their sovereignty fiercely. Now, this raises an important question that's often overlooked in these grand geopolitical discussions. The local actors. Local state and non-state actors in the Horn are not merely passive victims or pawns.
Right, you mentioned they make their own moves.
Exactly. They actively take advantage of foreign interests to strengthen their position, cleverly exploiting the foreign competition to persist and sometimes even perpetuate this endemic political instability.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Ethiopia notably secured arms from China, the UAE, Turkey, and Iran during the Tigray conflict. That demonstrates its ability to kind of shop around for support depending on its needs. Similarly, various factions in Somalia and Sudan strategically align themselves with external patrons to gain an upper hand internally.
Which explains why the alliances shift so quickly.
Precisely. That's why you'll see these cycles of alliance and enmity that shift rapidly, almost dizzyingly, based on internal fortunes and immediate needs. For example, right now, Ethiopia seems aligned with the UAE, Turkey, China, and Russia, while Eritrea aligns more with Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Somalia, feeling threatened by Ethiopia's Somaliland deal, has recently strengthened its ties with Egypt and Eritrea.
It's incredibly complex.
It is. The complexity is such that our sources even point to emerging alliances that could potentially pit the UAE, Ethiopia, Somaliland, and Sudan's RSF against a bloc of Egypt, Somalia, Eritrea, the Sudanese armed forces, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. It's a dynamic, constantly evolving puzzle.
Okay. So with all this incredible complexity, external influence, shifting alliances, how is the region actually trying to manage itself? Is there a regional body trying to keep things stable?
Well, the main regional body for peace and security in the Horn of Africa is the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, or IGAD.
IGAD.
Okay.
Has it been effective?
It has had its moments. IGAD has indeed played a significant role in peacemaking at times, particularly in South Sudan, where it notably brokered the 2018 revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict, the RARCSS.
Right.
That was widely seen as a milestone for African-led diplomacy, successfully leveraging local knowledge and a pragmatic approach to bring warring parties to the table.
That sounds promising. But I sense a but coming.
Well, yes, our sources are also quite clear. IGD's mediation efforts have faced many, many struggles that actually weaken the overall regional security architecture.
Like what?
You see this over-reliance on elite bargains. Essentially, peace agreements are signed by the leaders, but maybe not fully bought into lower down. It means peace was often just peace on paper, or what's even been called payroll peace.
Payroll peace. What does that mean exactly, and why is it a problem?
Payroll peace basically refers to agreements that are often signed because the warring elites, the leaders, receive financial incentives or power-sharing benefits, rather than there being a genuine bottom-up commitment to peace from the broader population.
Ah, okay.
It's problematic because it prioritizes short-term political expediency, getting a deal signed, over sustainable solutions. It leaves the underlying grievances, the root causes of the conflict, unaddressed. This makes the peace very fragile and prone to collapse once those incentives change or maybe run out.
Right. That makes sense. What else weakens IGAD?
There's often only tokenistic inclusion of civil society actors. This means their crucial knowledge, their local legitimacy, their understanding of community needs isn't fully utilized in the peace process. And there are persistent internal contradictions among its members. Like, Uganda was accused of playing a double game in South Sudan.
It's a double game.
Meaning it was ostensibly mediating peace while, allegedly, some factions within its government were secretly supporting one side of the conflict. Or you have Ethiopia's shifting priorities, which, depending on its internal situation, have sometimes been injurious to IGAD's credibility by undermining its collective efforts.
So internal politics bleeding into regional effort.
Exactly. And beyond that, IGAD suffers from structural weaknesses. It lacks robust enforcement tools, a consistent technical infrastructure, and it's heavily reliant on often unpredictable donor funding.
Right. Donor dependency is always tricky.
Very. Its secretariat, the administrative heart of the organization, is often sidelined in practice, making coherent, timely responses difficult. And then there's also this worrying proliferation of external mediation initiatives, like the Tumaini Peace Initiative in South Sudan, which often runs parallel to IGD's efforts.
Creating confusion.
Yes, creating confusion and sometimes even undermining IGD's authority.
This all points to a pretty critical conclusion that our sources seem to be repeating. IGD's peacemaking model really needs to be, reset or reimagined?
That's the phrase used, yes.
Oh.
To truly become a credible architect of durable peace in the Horn, it needs fundamental changes.
What kind of changes are recommended?
Well, to achieve that, the sources recommend several key things for IGD. First, far greater coherence in mediation efforts. Ideally, through a joint roadmap to unify messaging and monitor compliance across all actors involved.
Okay.
Its autonomy and capabilities must be significantly improved, strengthening its mediation support unit with dedicated regional analysts, real-time monitoring tools, that sort of thing.
More resources, basically.
More resources and smarter resources. IGAD also needs to reduce its heavy reliance on donor funding and forge deeper partnerships with African universities and think tanks to kind of institutionalize its peacemaking knowledge.
Makes sense.
Crucially, mediation efforts must move decisively beyond just these elite bargains to ensure meaningful, sustained participation of civil society actors, the voices on the ground.
Right. Get buy-in from everyone.
Exactly. And finally, it needs to establish clear repercussions for noncompliance with agreements, strengthen its rapid response capabilities, perhaps even with a regional sanctions framework, while simultaneously focusing on long-term conflict transformation. That means addressing the structural drivers of violence, building inclusive institutions, resolving land disputes, confronting historical grievances, ensuring justice and accountability. It's a tall order, but essential for lasting peace.
It really is. Now, our sources also highlight Ethiopia and Kenya as potential anchor states for the region, meaning they could be crucial pillars for stability. But you mentioned their relationship is complex.
Very complex. Ethiopia has historically been seen as the political engine of the region. It hosts the African Union seat.
Right.
However, its internal challenges, particularly the intense conflicts in Tigray, Amhara, and Oromia, have definitely dampened its regional position. It's been forced to refocus significant resources domestically.
And this affects its foreign policy.
Yes. This has also led to a noticeable shift towards a more bilaterally rooted, assertive, and realist foreign policy, which means it often prioritizes its own perceived national interests through direct state-to-state deals, sometimes at the expense of and even undermining multilateral organizations and regional initiatives like IG8.
Okay. What about Kenya? How is it playing its role?
Kenya, on the other hand, has emerged as a significant player, seemingly filling some of the vacuum left by Ethiopia's internal focus. It has a long-standing legacy as a fairly neutral arbiter in regional disputes.
Okay.
Our sources describe Kenya's peace diplomacy as being deeply rooted in economic, security, and prestige motivations, almost what they call a peace-for-profit model.
Peace for profit. What does that imply about their commitment to long-term stability? Is it just self-interest?
Well, the peace-for-profit model implies that while Kenya is genuinely invested in regional stability, instability is bad for business. Its engagement is often directly tied to its own economic benefits. Things like protecting trade routes, ensuring border security for its commerce, or enhancing its diplomatic standing to attract more investment.
It's the region's biggest economy, right?
Exactly. It's the region's most vibrant economy and largest trading power, so instability directly affects its bottom line. Now, while this can incentivize peace, it also means its foreign policy can sometimes be criticized for lacking coherence and long-term strategic planning. It can seem a bit ad hoc, meaning it's often reactive and influenced by domestic pressures or immediate leadership changes rather than a consistent long-term regional vision.
So, two potential anchors, but both have their challenges. Is there potential for them to work together?
Some observers have proposed exactly that. A twin anchor mechanism, which suggests combining Ethiopia's hardware, essentially its military capability and strategic weight, with Kenya's diplomatic goodwill and arbiter role. This could be a foundational partnership for regional cooperation, including potentially improving IG-80's capabilities together.
Interesting idea. Do the sources offer recommendations for these key players, Ethiopia and Kenya?
They do. For both Ethiopia and Kenya, the main advice is to coordinate their positions much more closely at the African Union and UN organs on peace and security issues. And crucially, to identify areas where their interests overlap and clearly acknowledge where they disagree so those disagreements can actually be managed or addressed.
Okay, makes sense. Anything specific for Kenya?
Yes, for Kenya specifically, the recommendations include trying trying to de-link domestic political pressures from foreign policy decisions where possible, pursuing cooperative relations even with potential competitors like Ethiopia and Tanzania, promoting synergy between the various regional economic communities to avoid duplication of effort, establishing more permanent structures for its peace diplomacy rather than relying on ad hoc initiatives, promoting regional market integration, and pursuing security partnerships that build up national capacities within the region rather than just importing external solutions. It's really about building resilience from within the Horn itself.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. What's the overall outlook?
Well, in summary, the Horn of Africa, as we've discussed, remains a highly volatile environment. This is due to that complex interplay of deeply interconnected internal crises, these persistent regional frictions, and of course, intense global power competition. Our sources are pretty clear that a durable region-wide settlement remains elusive in the short term. There are just too many structural pressures like scarce resources, the fragility of many state institutions, and these unresolved nationalisms bubbling under the surface.
And the role of external actors.
Our sources consistently call for these external actors to, quote, tone down the rivalries and engage more responsibly. The hope is they can encourage mutual benefit and stability rather than just pursuing narrow self-interest.
But is that realistic?
Well, given the deep-seated political, economic, and social problems within the Horn itself, external involvement, as our research clearly shows, will likely continue to be a mixed blessing at best. It can bring resources and attention, but it almost always complicates existing dynamics.
So after this deep dive, you, our listener, hopefully have a much clearer picture of the Horn of Africa, this region of immense strategic importance, incredibly complex history, and really ongoing struggle. As you reflect on everything we've discussed, maybe consider this. What does responsible engagement truly mean in a region like this, where every external action, however well-intentioned it might seem, runs the risk of inadvertently fueling deeper divisions and complicating the path to any kind of lasting peace? Something to think about.